Now comes the wonderful part of the evening where we honor those who in many ways are some of the greatest servants among us, or the greatest leaders, the greatest servant leaders. So tonight it's my honor to make the first introduction, and it's really also a point of pain, because this person has complicated Marianne's and my life. Because in all of the places that offer good features, all of the states, as we're thinking in the future, we might be in another state. Where would we go? And one of the key features for us is, what is the state's position on health freedom? And this person has now made us forcefully have to consider Nevada and add that to our list. So our life has become complicated. And so I want to share the biography of Jim Jenks for a moment, which is probably up there. But let's just look a little at him. He's an herbalist and runs Herbal Rose with his wife Linda on a small green ranch south of Reno in the Washoe Lake Valley. They proudly boast being one of the first zero-energy footprint businesses in the community. Jim holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration from the University of Arizona, a Chartered Herbalist degree from Dominion Herb College, a Certificate of Merit in Iridology from Dr. Bernard Jensen, and a Doctor of Herbal Medicine from American Medical College. He recently celebrated his 40th year in the nutrition education field. He has studied with numerous leading teachers and has authored several books and videos. He's lectured in almost every state: Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and the UK, and has been on regional, national TV and radio interviews and lectured at numerous herb conventions. Jim and his wife have in-depth experience and expertise in balancing people with herbs and nutrition. Together they serve as a research center for hundreds of herb shops throughout the nation. So we're going to do the video.
Thanks for honoring my team for the passage of AB 295 here in dry but beautiful northern Nevada. We don't claim Las Vegas. My team is Paul Miller, Diane Miller, Alexis Miller, my lobbyist, and Clinton Miller. And yes, I'm claiming Clinton because I worked with him for many years in the California legislature and the Nevada legislature, and of course he taught me whatever I do in the legislatures. And what he taught us to do, of course, was get lots of people in the committees with our badge, yes, on AB 295, and of course, it worked. Diane Miller, you all know, she is a great gal, and I'm not going to go on all of her attributes. But without her, our law wouldn't exist and wouldn't get gotten passed. I basically just sat back when we heard of problems from other lobbyists through our sponsor, Assemblyman Randy Kerner. Just let her and our lobbyists work them out. And it worked. And that is a real key in what happens in the legislature for those of you who don't work it. So the bill, the new Nevada Health Freedom Law, would not exist without Diane Miller. Thanks, Diane. Because of these elected people have in the legislature, they depend heavily on lobbyists to get information. And as an example, in just little Nevada, this last session we had 1,300 bills, and our legislative session is only 120 days long. So our lobbyist, Alexis Miller, knew the other lobbyists. She had worked with them for years. And when we heard of a problem coming back from Randy Kerner, she and the lobbyists would get together, she would get together with Diane Miller, and they would work out the problem. And we had fantastic results. Alexis Miller, our lobbyist, was a Democrat and knew the Democrats. I am a Republican. I knew the Republicans. Alexis Miller was working with the lobbyists. And on the votes, in the Commerce Committee, on the Assembly and the Senate, we got 100% Democrat and 100% Republican. On the floor, we got 100% Democrat in the Senate and almost 100% in the Assembly. We had an old family doctor that wouldn't go along with us. So, and Alexis had worked with many of the medical people, lobbyists, the doctor, the lobbyist, even the homeopathic, the chiropractor. All of these people had to get their say in. So the bottom line is this: if you want to get a bill passed, you need a lobbyist that has these kinds of relationships. It's really important. We were able to hire a lobbyist here because Clinton Miller, myself, Joan Vandergriff, and Jack Richardson, many years ago, formed an association, a manager association. This doesn't involve corporate, and a group of managers, and we call it the Sunshine Health Freedom Foundation in Nature Sunshine products. Myself and many of our managers donate to this monthly, and we've started out supporting Clinton Miller, and of course now we're supporting Diane Miller and her staff. Our president, Kurt Bashaw, is
well, he's here. It's perfect.
And that's a perfect introduction.
All right, Jim, I think
more
we're all done.
public education about health freedoms. I don't think people realize what a health freedom is. I think we need to get the supplement people, the supplement managers, manufacturers, more involved with the state legislatures, state laws, and of course that means getting them to give us some money to get that job done. And finally, I would like to suggest that our good friend Diane Miller gets a week off in Hawaii, all expenses paid. Thanks for letting me be part of your team. And now, team, we've got a lot of work to do. Thanks.
So to accept this award, I'd like Kirk Bashaw to come up here. Come on up. Okay. So, for his long-term outstanding leadership for health freedom in Nevada, promoting and protecting access to herbalists and all of natural health care, and for his many years of vigilance in protecting health freedoms in Nevada, which led to the passage of Nevada's 2015 AB 295, the new Provision of Wellness Services Law. This award goes to Jim Jenks.
I'd just like to say a couple of things. Jim sent this to me, email, to read in front of you all. He did not tell me he was sending a video with the same verbiage. Thanks, Jim. So on Jim's behalf, I'd just like to add a couple of things that Jim did on his own to get this bill passed in Nevada. Jim, I am a Nature Sunshine Senior National Manager, as well as Jim Jenks. Jim, over the years, has been a mentor to me. My father passed 17 years ago, Jim has kind of filled that void for me. I became a part of the health freedom fight a lot because of Jim Jenks. I am now the president of the Sunshine Health Freedom Foundation. Jim is the vice president, and to get this bill passed in Nevada, he stepped back from our organization because we are a nonprofit, and he could not lobby being a part of a nonprofit organization. He has spent many of his own dollars and many, many, many years in the Nevada Capitol, schmoozing, taking these guys out to play golf, taking them out to lunch, but this is all coming personally out of Jim's pocket. When he came back to us and said, listen, I've been beating my head against the wall trying to get this bill passed and it's not working. I need $20,000 for this lobbyist in Nevada to get this bill passed. Immediately, it was a unanimous vote. He got the bill, they got it passed. Thank God for Jim Jenks.
So our next Health Freedom Award is going to Pete Kennedy. Pete Kennedy is an attorney in Sarasota, Florida, and he serves as president of Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund. Pete Kennedy has assisted and/or represented dairy farmers who are facing possible enforcement actions in various states, as well as helping others to get started in the business of distributing raw milk or raw dairy products. Pete has counseled on a variety of issues, including the right to farm, on-farm poultry and meat processing, herd shares, buying club operations, and legislation at both the state and federal level. He is currently working to promote the passage of the Raw Milk Freedom Act, the Interstate Milk Freedom Act, and the PRIME Act, which is the Processing, Revival, and Intrastate Meat Exemption Act. What Diane is for the health freedom issues, Pete Kennedy is for raw milk issues. He has his hands in all the states who are working to promote access to raw foods, and is there to guide all the activists who are willing to do the work. So if Pete would please come up on stage. Love to. Yeah, of course. I'm going to say one more thing and then give you the mic here. So specifically, we are awarding him this year for his leadership and dedication in supporting raw milk advocates in numerous states and acting as a central hub of information and support for protection and promotion of access to raw milk products in the U.S. and in celebration of the impressive success in 2015 specifically of having 6 states successfully pass raw milk legislation, with Connecticut being the 6th state in 2015. So congratulations for all your success. Thank you so much.
All right. It's an honor to be recognized by Diane Miller, just someone with her long track record of success, someone you'd like to match, and we've got a ways to go, but we're working at it. The Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund mainly formed due to raw milk enforcement actions first half of last decade. Since, in the 8 years since we've been up and running, there's still enforcement actions out there, but I don't think they're nearly as many as there were at one time. The regulatory climate has improved. I'd say there's legal access now in probably 41 or 42 states to raw milk. Yeah, like Ann said, it was a good legislative session. I mean, the 6 states that passed raw milk already had laws legalizing it, but these laws expanded access. Connecticut was one of the more interesting ones. We had a member work on that. Like Ann said, we mainly work in an advisory capacity as an information clearinghouse. The Connecticut bill legalized herd shares. You can sell milk there with a license, but for the smaller dairies, the cost is prohibitive. There was a hearing on that bill, and I think our member who was working on it and her selectmen were the only two people who testified in favor of the bill. The Department of Agriculture testified against it, and that bill wound up passing, I think, with unanimous margins in both the House and Senate, which is leads me to believe the legislature was tired of listening to the Department of Agriculture at that time. In addition to just working on the legislative front, we've also had some major court cases, a couple big wins in criminal cases, and the criminal case basically just applies to the defendant legally, but politically they go a lot further. And one of our members who won a big raw milk case, he was, I think, charged on 3 counts of violating the Minnesota Food and Dairy Law a few years ago, and that would be Alvin Schlang. And Alvin, if you could stand up, he's with us tonight in the back of the room. Just one of the highlights from Alvin's trial was just for people who read the mainstream media about it, they get this belief that raw milk is almost like a drug. It's the white substance. And Alvin's trial was an education for a lot of people, I think. A lot of his customers came in, the moms with their kids. Kids were really well behaved. As a matter of fact, the judge actually commented during the middle of the trial how well behaved the kids were, and someone piped up right after he said that, well, must be the raw milk. It's people like Alvin who have the courage to stand up for what they believe in. Alvin actually went through 2 different criminal trials that I think overall they caused the regulators to back off somewhat. I think in addition to the legislation, these big trials, Vernon Hershberger in Wisconsin is another major win. Our Vice President Elizabeth Rich worked on that trial that I think changed the overall perception, maybe get the regulatory agencies to back off a bit and just improve the chances of it being legalized in every state, which is where I think we're eventually going. As far as our organization, there's a book that came out earlier this year called By the People, Reclaiming Liberty Without Permission. And in that book, the author basically calls for a national defense fund to pick these especially obnoxious bureaucratic regulations and just regulate them and grind the bureaucracy down. And that's something we've done, I think, from the beginning. We've litigated a lot of cases. If they go after our members for something we think is important, they're going to be seeing Gary Cox, our general counsel. In Wisconsin, they're going to be seeing Elizabeth Rich, our vice president, and who's also a great litigator. Originally, we were planning on having Elizabeth working in other states, but the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture is keeping her so busy these days, not on raw milk issues mainly, but on other issues. She's staying pretty much within the state of Wisconsin. One thing that I think enables us to take the cases on that we have is we've always been independent. We've never taken a dime from the government. I mean, we wind up in court with the government. We've taken, the only corporate money we've really taken is from small, like-minded businesses. And our ultimate goal is just to create a food system where the right is established that everyone can obtain the food of their choice from the source of their choice, whether or not that source is regulated. We've think the most effective way to work is on the state level. I guess the next awardee, I'll be talking about one of the big state successes, and mainly trying to do damage control on the federal level. I mean, there are some bills, some great bills. There's a great representative in Kentucky, 4th District, Thomas Massey, who's introduced the raw milk bills that was mentioned, along with this Prime Act, which is basically throwing power back to the states. Right now, anything slaughtered and processed at a custom house cannot be sold. And this would give the states the option, throw it back to the states, and give them the option of selling custom processed meat. States like Minnesota, Wisconsin have a stronger slaughterhouse infrastructure, but there are many states around the country where it's sorely lacking. So it's, we've got a lot of work left to do, but it's great to be recognized for what we've accomplished so far. So thank you very much.
So like Pete just hinted at, our next award is also for raw milk legislation. This award is going to Frank Wallace of the Wyoming Food Freedom Group. Frank Wallace is a full-time farmer in northern Wyoming, and his company, Easy Rocking Ranch, has been marketing local foods in Gillette, Sheridan, and the Buffalo area for over 10 years through farmers markets and direct sales. Frank is involved in helping develop local food systems to help regenerate rural economies in Wyoming and in other states. Frank has been invited to speak at various events, including recently testifying before the Montana legislature regarding developing raw milk access, and at the Wyoming gatherings of local food lovers. He was a panelist at the Food Freedom Fest in Virginia this fall to help the local food movement spread nationwide. The Wyoming Food Freedom Act, which became law this spring, was a major success for the local food movement, and one of his main goals is to continue to the development of local foods not only in Wyoming but across the country. He is a member of the Weston A. Price Foundation and of the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund, and tonight accepting the award on his behalf is Pete Kennedy, and Frank wanted to say that this award should be accepted on behalf of the many people who lobbied, made phone calls, sent emails, attended the hearings, and testified over the period of many years to have this Wyoming Food Freedom Act enacted in their state. NHFC congratulates him and his team for over 6 years of rigorous work on getting this WFFA, the Wyoming Food Freedom Act, passed into law on March 3rd, earlier this year. And it sets a high bar for the efforts at similar legislation elsewhere across the state, or within the states. And right now, the act that was just passed made it so the production and sale within Wyoming of any food, except for meat products, by a producer direct to the informed end consumer is no longer subject to licensing or inspection. So if Pete would like to come up and talk a little bit about that battle in Wyoming, that'd be great. Thank you.
Frank and Wallace's late sister, Sue, who was a state representative in Wyoming, was the original sponsor of the Wyoming Food Freedom Act back in 2009. And I think she was contacted or either made aware of a post by Bill Marler, who's one of the big foodborne illness, personal injury lawyers in the country, basically saying something to the effect that if this passed, he was going to own lots of farmland in Wyoming. And Sue Wallace basically said, well, bring it on. And the, it was between 2009 and 2015, the bill was probably introduced 4 or 5 different times. And there was one year where Ange just said the bill that eventually became law did not include meat and products, mainly because of the federal law, the Federal Meat Inspection Act. But there was at least one year I remember where Sue Wallace was going to take that on directly too. Part of the bill she introduced was going to allocate money for the Attorney General to litigate the issue in court if the USDA went after the state of Wyoming for violating the Federal Meat Inspection Act. Probably at least twice that bill passed out of the House, but there was one stumbling block. It would get over to the Senate, and this the Senate Ag Chair was a big ally of agribusiness. He managed to kill it every year until this past year, and he was still in power in this past year. But there was a freshman representative there, Tyler Lindholm, who just, according to Frank, did a great job steering the bill through. It went to the this chair's committee again, but he was outvoted by his own committee, a 3-2 vote, and it was clear sailing from there. And it's kind of set people on fire in other states. We've had, I think, inquiries in about 10 different states since, with people interested in passing food freedom legislation. We'll see what happens once the session rolls around, but Virginia has introduced a bill similar for the past 3 years. The Maine almost passed a bill this past year. It got out of both the House and Senate, but it was just someone, agency posted a fiscal note, and the this finance committee shot the bill down. But it mainly, I mean, it's the gold standard, this Wyoming bill right now. Next year they're going to do something with meat ingredients where, as long as it was processed, the meat was processed at an inspected facility, someone can sell beef stew or a similar product without any regulation. But I think this is what we're all about at this conference. I was a delegate at the first couple conferences 2 and 3 years ago, but and the foodie groups are outnumbered here. It's us, Weston Price, Farm and Ranch Freedom Alliance, but we all believe in the principle that we're the ones who determine what we put in our bodies, not the government. And if it's a direct transaction between farmer and consumer, it's none of the government's business. We have that right. So let's hope this is the start of a number of bills to come.